World's Worst Radio Show with MVA Joshua, April 7th. What are we going to do? We're going to play a record, and we're going to talk about starting projects. I think we're going to talk about starting projects. We might talk about something different. We got this beautiful white vinyl of a new Brutalism record from a bazillion years ago. Not a bazillion, but more than 10. Gorgeous fluorescent orange kind of cover. Very shellacky kind of post-hardcore record. Let's see if we pick up some people today. If you've been watching these on YouTube, I appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a comment too. And everybody that's been joining in and asking questions and stuff, thank you. The more questions there are, the better these episodes seem to be. I feel like that should be louder. Anyone from Starbucks is watching this, please sponsor this show by sending me boxes of Via. Dan Black and I recently saw this band, who I think hadn't played a show in at least 10 years, in Knoxville, Tennessee, opening for Juno 44, and it was killer, and it was so fun, and they played in this dirty little 100 capacity room, and it was great, and everyone there was locals, so like you walked in and it's like you were like from another planet at someone's party, and it was pretty rad. Trying to think if I got any thoughts on this. I haven't listened to this record in a long time, but man, is it good. Comes with no documentation whatsoever. I do love it when people make their records open from the top. I think I'm going to start doing that. The problem is then you don't have a spine though. New Brutalism, Structural Gymnastics is the name of this 12-inch. Sound on Sound, 2001. We'll make it a little bit louder. Just that color a little bit. It's hard to hate guitars like this. I think what we'll do is let one or two of these songs play and then talk a little bit about starting projects, keeping with projects, and maybe the big idea is, do you have to stick with something? Can you can you just abandon stuff? Can you start stuff and just abandon it? Or is that bad? Incidentally, I realized this hat was bought on the way to this new Brutalism show in Knoxville, which I did not realize at the time that I put it on today. I'm gonna loop these drums and do something with them. That's cool. If you're watching this on YouTube, the questions come from my Instagram Live, which is being streamed over to an iPad over here. If you want to ask a question or you want to join it while it's live, especially since at least one of these, backwards. I record all of them, but then like yesterday's never was able to actually get posted to my story because I think I had a copyright flag in it. But if you want to join me, MVA Joshua on Instagram, probably a link in the show notes here. And then on top of that, if you can't but you have a question, you can DM me via Instagram or leave a comment with a question. I typically say that I want creative questions, but considering how much time is spent on this show listening to 90s hardcore records, if you have questions about the music and stuff, feel free to send it. Ooh, that was neat. Alright, so we're gonna let this song play and then we're gonna talk about starting projects. Probably don't need to let this whole thing play, huh? Probably not, considering you could go listen to it on Spotify in much better quality, or whatever. Brian, what's up? I hope that you're healthy and not feeling a burning in your chest. We're listening to this new Brutalism 12-inch. And I'm going to talk about starting projects. Probably going to talk about it in a second, unless you have a question, because questions take precedence. Say no to Corona. Tell me about it. One of the things that's weird about I live in a really small house, so very often everyone that lives in the house is in the same room or is in two rooms connected by a great pathway of air. So the kids hear this sort of unfiltered conversation about the coronavirus, and I feel bad because a lot of times it's like, a lot of death and destruction. And sometimes they're like, they freak out a little bit, and I realize like it's not cool. So, and I refer to anything that's been outside as like corona whatever, so it might be corona mail or something like that. Alright. I feel like... Brian, do you have any questions? Or anything that you want me to talk about? Peace out. All right, let's bring this record down to a low rumble. Now let's just turn it off. The thing I'm thinking about is the idea that a lot of people get freaked out about starting new stuff and changes it might require of them. And what I was initially thinking about is there's this episode of Seinfeld where, I can't remember the name of the episode, it's probably called The Threesome or something like that. What's up, man? I am about to relate a creative story by connecting it to the idea of the Jerry Seinfeld threesome episode of Seinfeld. And I'm going to recap it real quick for your benefit. So, Jerry's dating this woman. He wants to break up with her and date her roommate. Very complicated situation. George says, suggest a threesome. The woman he's dating will be offended and will break up with him and think he's a disgusting pervert. And the other woman will be flattered and he'll get what he wants. But what he doesn't expect to happen is that when he suggests, I believe it's pronounced ménage à trois, the woman goes, kinky, and then talks to the roommate, and the roommate's into it. And Jerry can't go through with it because of the changes it would require of him, because he starts going on about how he's not a threesome guy. He'd have to dress differently. He'd have to have a different apartment. He'd have to wear shirts with the buttons open and wear necklaces. And like, he has this vision in his mind of what that would take. And I think that a lot of people get stuck in these weird things about starting a project because they think that it requires these changes, that it requires a commitment to a certain course, and that it requires you to do different things. And like, I'm thinking about it because somehow over the last 3 weeks, now I've got a bizarro radio show or a talk show, whatever the hell this idea is, that isn't done correctly on numerous levels, and that it doesn't demand a lot, but you got to make the thing, and then to put it on YouTube, I have to edit it, and I have to make the titles for it, and I've got to write descriptions, and I've got to do this stuff. So it adds up into a bigger thing. One of the things I was already thinking about was like, well, if I start doing this every day, am I going to have to like have this expectation? And like, what if I don't feel like it? And the thing, of course, is if I don't feel like doing it every day, I can quit. I don't owe anyone anything, and they don't owe me anything. And if I just decide tomorrow, like, I'm done with it, then it's cool to be done with it. But I think a lot of people, they want to start a thing and they get caught up in like, well, if I'm going to do that, there's a bunch of stuff I have to do. And it might be stuff like I have to buy equipment, but it might be all this other stuff. Like, well, if I want to start a band, then I've got to, I don't know, like maybe I think I've got to dress differently. Or like if I want to be a rapper, do I have to go to open mics and do I have to battle people and all this stuff? And it's like, nah, you can just do it in whatever way you want to do it. You can start it and you can always quit. And I think one of the values of being okay with always quitting is that it sort of means whatever you're doing it because it's compelling and fun. So then on top of that, you're learning from it. So even if after today I don't do this anymore, there's a bunch of stuff over the course of 3 weeks of doing the actual show, recording them, editing them, listening to them on both Instagram and YouTube, and just learning from them that will apply to if I ever do anything else, whether it's another podcast or another type of show, or even if I'm in a conversation with someone and they're thinking about doing a thing, I've at least got a little bit of information that I can give to them. The big kind of point that I would make is like, it's totally okay to start stuff and quit. It's okay to start something, think you're going to do it every day, and stop or miss days. There's this big thing that like you've got to be like the uber hustler that grinds every day, day in and day out. And it's like, if you're learning stuff in the doing of it and you're getting joy out of it in the doing of it, then it doesn't matter. Like, if I pick up my skateboard tomorrow, there's no reason why I need to be skateboarding every single day. It will be fun if I can do it once a week, twice a week, or once a month. It'll probably be more fun if I can do it like 3 times a week, but regardless, like, I'm doing it for joy, not to become a professional skateboarder. So if you want to do a thing and the goal is not to, I don't know, make $1 million doing it, then there's no need to be like 100% all in, totally committed to like if I was like, all right, I'm doing a radio show. I mean, I'd probably have to reorganize my life a little bit if I was going to be all like serious about it. But instead it's like, it works to do it. So far, I've always managed to get my work done in time that I can carve out the time for it. Tomorrow I might not be able to. Not a big deal. Maybe at some point it would become a big deal, but for the purposes of starting, it doesn't really matter. You can just jump in with the tools that you have. And just to be like hyper clear, because like you can't really see the setup, but if you're on Instagram, like, be clear about the setup. Cheapo record player, JBL box, just recorded directly into the external mics on these devices. Maybe one day I'll buy stuff, maybe I'll buy a mixer, maybe I'll do whatever, but for now, the purposes of starting, the purposes of learning a whole bunch of stuff and having a lot of fun, this works. That said, let's play a record. I'm kind of intrigued by this like 90s emo compilation. It's called We've Lost Beauty. It was on File 13 Records in Arkansas. So we're going to listen to the B-side. I think the first song will be a Mohinder song. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's listen to this Mohinder song and give my voice a rest for a minute. Oh, it's not Mohinder, it's Current. Love Current. Yeah, just start somehow, some way. No, I like having something to talk about. Can't tell if it's loud enough. Sounds really quiet. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I get quite a bit out of your collages. What's after this? Current? That series for Element, that stuff was awesome. I really like this thing of listening to records just to see what they sound like. So it's funny because like I think I have learned so much in a really short period of time. Because like a whole bunch of the first 10, I'd post them to the story and then I would delete them 5 minutes later. Whether it was because they became so group chatty, but it was like I was getting 10 messages and talking, and I was like, who in their right mind wants to listen to this? Because it's like, it's just weird. And then the other thing was like, maybe there was a great 10-minute actual bit of content in the middle of it, surrounded by group chat and awkward silence, and I'd record it so that I could pull out that chunk. But then I was like, I didn't have anything else to do. Initially I was like gonna fold laundry. That was like my new plan, because I thought it would be funny to watch the dude fold his laundry. But it's like, you know, you figure that out, or you realize, for example, that like when you listen to the radio, when you turn it on, they don't stop what they're doing and then say, oh, thanks for joining us, Kevin. This is Plunger. I think they were from Pennsylvania. Let's see. This is a nice record, though. I'm too blind to look at any of this shit, though. Seriously, I cannot read this thing. It's hurting my eyes. All right. There's a Julia song after this, though. That'd be nice. Let's see. What else did you say? Are you cooped up by yourself, or are you like quarantining with someone? No, it totally makes sense. Oh, good. I think if I was like doing this like solo, I would end up feral very quickly. It would not be good. And now it's such a relief to have any alone time. Like everybody went to they went to like Lake Nokomis or something, and I just sat in the backyard by myself eating lunch, and it was the most wonderful thing in the world. Still trying to figure out who this dude is. This is kind of amazing. This compilation is dedicated to a 16-year-old who died in a car accident. Imagine making like that much of a dent in the world at 16. Just reading here. The other thing I'm learning is like just to have no expectations of what's going to happen day to day. I think I want to talk about the impulse thing a little bit and start jumping into projects rather than planning them, kind of continuing that thread. Oh. There's a skate park down the block from my house, and I haven't been going to it just because I feel like I need to get Bondo and just fix all the cracks. Like when I first moved to this neighborhood, it was rad, and now it's like all the ramps have sunk below the asphalt, and it's so lame. So thinking about the idea of like acting on an impulse, and I think one of the things that's weird is that it feels wrong just to say, like, for example, I want to start a band, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to find the closest possible or I'm gonna make music, and I'm gonna just find just the closest possible instruments, and I'm gonna start with that, and I'm not gonna worry about it. Like, I'm literally like, who knows? Maybe I'm gonna go upstairs and grab like a kid's banjo and just start playing that, or start writing songs on that without knowing how to play the banjo, maybe not even knowing about tuning, but just exploring this thing that I want to do, and that runs counter to how we're taught to do a lot of stuff. My kids are taught to learn the alphabet, not to learn how to tell stories, but they tell stories way before they start learning the alphabet. Like, the stories are the interesting part. The alphabet's just a means to an end. The reality is that how most people naturally learn things is they start doing the thing, and then they learn about it through the doing of it. But that what ends up happening is that, like, schools promote the idea of learning the thing than applying the learning to the doing. And I think they're quite different because they're always sort of divorced and weird. And I think one of the things is that if you have shitty tools, you learn a lot from shitty tools. Like, you hear it again and again from really anybody. Like, if you watch the 9 Club, the skateboard talk show, and I swear, every episode, it's like, how'd you start skating? This person gave me this messed up, heavy, beat up piece of crap, and I fell in love with it. It's never like, well, I watched 140 hours of YouTube videos, I researched the market, I moved to a new part of the country, and then I bought the absolute best board that I could, and I found a private tutor. I'm sure there's somebody that does that, but in general, like, that's not how it works. That's not how passions work. And if anything, I think that's why a lot of people have these ideas about a passion they have, but they don't jump into it because of the fact that they think that they should do it the right way. You should learn, you should buy equipment, you should take lessons, you should do all of this stuff. But the reality is that, like, when you develop passions as a kid, you jump in head first, fuck it, you don't care if you're good, you just care about, like, the joy in the process. It's only once you become an adult that you start doing this thing of, like, oh, I want to start playing guitar. Like, that's really simple. Just go buy the cheapest guitar in the world or borrow one. But what do people do? Oh, well, I need to get lessons. Well, to get lessons, I got to figure out how I can carve out this amount of time a week. Whereas if you had the cheap shit guitar, you could just binge watch The Walking Dead and fuck around with that guitar for hours at a time. It wouldn't be the quote-unquote right way to do it, but it would be really fun. That would be a super fun way to do it. And these are things I think about a lot because, like, schools tend to run counter to that, and being someone who's supposed to teach in an art school, you're supposed to be counter to that. What's up, Kevin? I'm gonna let you pop in here for a minute. Kevin, what's up? We've never met.
Hey, dude, no, I know. I've always wanted to talk to you, and I figured we would by this point, but we haven't, which is crazy to me.
I don't leave my house or talk to other people, so that's how it works.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, like, blow up your shit, though, if you're trying to, like, keep it settled, but you just, like, making me want to say so much stuff back to you.
No, let's do it.
No, okay, so going back to the impulse thing you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I think music and guitar in a band, like, that is an example that you're mentioning. I think that one's, like, the one I have, like, the most hang-ups with, too. There's something built up in my head, especially, too, like, knowing and having friends that make music and are so fucking good at it.
Yeah.
It feels like, even though my brain, like, knows to not give a shit about the rules and, like, what's right and how to play and what, having to learn everything,
Mm-hmm.
There's something still in my gut that's just, like, so embarrassed and gets so queasy even thinking about, like, actually doing it.
Oh.
So, I don't know, that's just, like, that is an example to me, just, like, gets me, like, fuck.
That makes sense to me, to get hung up on that, because that's one of those things that people have a vision in their head, right? It's kind of like but it's talking about the idea of, like, people thinking that because they're going to do a thing, they need to adjust their whole lifestyle. Like, think about, like, the idea of the rock singer. Well, I can't sing in a band because first I have to be cool. You don't have to. You can just do the thing. Like, you don't have to be cool. I think maybe the reason, like, I've never put out a rap song is in large part because that's the thing I'm, like, the most hung up on, the idea of a self-image. But then again, it might just be that I'm not disciplined enough to figure out how to just... I should just do this. Yeah. Phone, speaker, done.
Do you play music?
Yeah. So
You do.
I write music. I don't play, but I take it really seriously. But in the bizarre way that I take things seriously, like to me, taking things seriously is like doing them while I eat soup for a half hour. Like, not like being like Mr. Serious. But I think that's a really good example because like one of the things I noticed, and this is why I don't freak out about this stuff too much, is let's just say you're like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna start a band and I'm gonna play guitar. Even though I've never played guitar, I just have this feeling that I want to. There's all this stuff that's gonna be technically hard to do in terms of your like hands and your body and whatnot. But there's this other advantage, which is that you're old and you have taste. And that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember talking with my wife, like, because she knew I was like making a lot of music, but she's like, yeah, but isn't the app doing it? And I was like, no, dude, like I load a drum sample and then I fuck with it until it hits this thing in my ear where I'm like, oh, that's what I want to hear. And then it's like with any instrument or anything really, you can find this weird sweet spot. Like, yeah, you might not be technically good at drawing, but you can be interesting at mark making. And that everything you've learned in the previous decades applies. And then the other thing that happens is you hear everything differently. Like I swear, like you start making music and everything sounds different now. Because all of a sudden, like you start paying attention to snares in a totally different way. But a lot of people won't do that because they'll get hung up on the like needing to get calluses on their fucking fingers and learning scales. And that's like the least important aspect. If you're hung up on things, you just have to constantly find permission to do them. Like one of my favorite bands is the Warmers, this DC band. They were around for maybe 2-3 years. And Alec Mackay from Faith and Ignition was the guitarist. And he did not play guitar before he was in the Warmers. The other members helped him play guitar. They went with him to pick out a guitar, and then he wrote the simplest riffs on the planet, and they just helped him out. I just constantly remind myself of that. Because I saw them play, and I remember thinking, he doesn't know how to play guitar. Like, you could tell by looking at him that he wasn't a 42-year-old guitarist. He was a 42-year-old beginning guitarist, and it was cool as shit.
Earlier, like the age thing, like the older you get, like, I mean, I've gotten a lot better about it these days, but there's still that weird shit in my head that was always just like, once you're an adult or you're a certain age, it's like sillier or weirder to fucking start doing that new thing, and you know, and then it's like there's a certain expectation as an adult, you're supposed to like know better, know what you're doing before you present it. You know, I'm always trying to get back to that like little kid mode of like, I don't have to, like when I was like 12 years old, no one expected me to have it all figured out. So they would just like watch whatever you did as a 12-year-old and be like, that's dope. Like, you're a 12-year-old trying shit.
There's an aspect too of it where it's totally appropriate to do kid things as long as you've been doing them since you were a kid. So if you're Cool G Rap and you're like 60 and a rapper, as long as you've been doing it since 15, totally fine with everybody. But if you start at 35, wildly inappropriate. And I think like that's another thing that people get hung up on.
Yeah. When I get to that point, because my brain knows if I like think long enough, I'm like, yeah, I know nobody gives a shit, but it's that thing in your gut that's like still lingering.
Even like doing this, right? Like doing the live thing, because like everybody's like, oh, I've never done that before. And it's like, I've only done it a handful of times. But it's like the argument against doing it is the awkwardness of not knowing what to do. Like that's really the issue. Or the fear that other people will think that you're full of yourself.
I think that's the one I always stick with or like get stuck on when I try to do shit is like people are going to think like, what a kook, like you think you're important, you need to talk.
And then eventually you get over it as you do these different things. Doing this now versus doing it 4 years ago would be radically different for me because it's like I kind of pump out a steady stream of myself talking. But there's totally this fear of like, well, who am I? Why would I be doing this? And why would I think like that anyone should listen to this thing? And then there's like the like judgment thing. But of course, making this into a ridiculous radio show that's done in the most asinine manner possible, I'm sure that the reality is like a couple people are going to be like, what the fuck am I watching? But then a bunch of other people are going to be like, oh shit, you don't need any equipment? Sick. Like, I should do that, or I wish that I had the like, I don't give a fuckness to do that. And it's like the reality is most of the things that we do that step out of character, most people wish that they could stuff down the fear of opinions enough to jump into it.
I mean, I get that from you, like even the old YouTube videos you've done where you're walking and talking and all that stuff.
Oh god, and I hated doing that. It's so painful.
But I think you talked about it, like learning to get over that fear of just like being on camera, talking and being around people on camera, and like that all those like weird insecurities about it. One of my favorite things is just like, this guy's just like willing to walk around and talk on a camera and film it and post it, and people he might walk by. That like
It took a lot.
It's like, fuck, I want that, dude. Like, yeah, that you get envious of that.
You know what's super funny? I realized this today. So my kids, because you know they're not in school, they've got to make like videos and stuff to send to class. And I've heard both of them say this over the last couple of days. Why does my voice sound like that? Which everyone understands. And I realized today that I no longer hear a difference. Like,
oh, really?
The sound that comes out of a speaker and the sound that I hear in my head, they've leveled out. And they're basically the same now, which I don't think I really realized was possible. I think it's just I heard it so much and understood it was me that it's like, yeah, there's not actually a gap anymore. It took probably 1,000 hours of listening to audio, like editing my own self, but it tripped me out to think like, oh yeah, I don't hear that anymore. Like, as far as I'm concerned, what I'm hearing is what it sounds like, but I know it's not.
I mean, that it's like mellowed out a bit and like doesn't have that jarring effect anymore. It's like cool to know that that's possible.
Oh, it's super nice. I mean, I like the sound of my voice, and I hated it for 30 years.
When we did our podcast, that was like one of those big revelations to me of like, the voice thing was jarring, and it was weird being like, I'm talking, oh god, I sound like a fucking idiot. Why do I talk so fast? Like, why do I say these weird tics? What do I have? All the weird shit about yourself. But like, I noticed having it was a scheduled thing. We just kept doing it, and the more we did it, the more I just was like, fuck it, I can't control it. I probably will never know what I really sound like to another human being, because we were doing it every week too. I was just like I was investing my time in like preparing to do the podcast, or like Michael would edit it, so we'd listen, and I'd actually just sit and listen and try to take actual notes of like things I can control, you know?
100%.
I was like, I'm not gonna like fix and change and get a new voice. It's like, but I could probably not repeat things as much because that's annoying to listen to. You know,
totally.
Like actual helpful shit.
The thing now is like I can look at a waveform and know that's that's like, that's and that's so. Those are the big things that show up again and again, and it drives me nuts. And then gradually you start to make some adjustments, but then I've picked up new annoying to me habits, like these big gaps so that I don't say but now I've got these big gaps I have to edit out.
Whereas, especially like, I know coming from like a design background and shit too, you're always critiquing and trying to get shit like just right, so it's like you can't totally give it up. But there's also part of that where it's like, if I really listen to other people that do podcasts or make videos or whatever and talk that I like they have tons of their own shit, and if I was to be like harsh and try to critique them the way I critique myself, like I would find all their fucking tics, I
edit the stuff that ends up coming out now really heavily. If you see the timeline, it's like 0.6 seconds, 0.6 seconds, 0.6 seconds. Because like I just try to be as brutal as possible so that someone listening to it can just get it all in. But over time, you're also like, I need to work on those pauses, because they're not dramatic pauses. They're me fumbling for a thing to say, and I hate having to edit it, and I hate having to listen to it. Yeah, you make the thing, and then you absorb it, and then you course correct based on that.
And you've been doing it for long enough, like making videos and stuff like this, so it's like, for you, it's you got deep into it, and you're down that progression, whereas like people starting out are, you know, you're better off, like you're talking about, like, go with the impulse, just do the thing, make the thing, try the thing. With art making too, it's like when I used to struggle, like in design school, the biggest problem was I was constantly like editing before I actually made anything.
Oh, that's what I did too. Like, I mean, I was a terrible student.
My teachers, I remember like my professors telling me, they're like, you're already defining, like you're creating all these rules for yourself before you've actually made anything interesting. Like you're working on like what the grid should be and all the fucking like rules that you cannot break. Yeah. But you don't have anything built. And I remember my teachers like, chill, relax, make shit, anything, stretch it out, make it weird, fuck around, and then go back at the end and decide like, okay, what did I do? Now I can create rules from the thing that's already there spontaneously. Like, but yeah, I would like do the opposite. I'm just like, create all the rules and then try to define within that. But it was,
yeah, because the rules are like a conceptual gesture. So then you think like, oh, well, I'm coming up with an idea by developing these rules, which I'm sure works for some people, but for me, it just meant I didn't make stuff, or it was stilted and fucked up, or I would justify how it sucked based on the rules I had set up. Like, well, this doesn't suck because the rules were this. That took me a really long time to stop doing.
I think too, it's like I realized how much that's the way my brain was trained to just go into like elementary school, high school, like growing up, like everything was just like, here's the rules, like if you can follow and answer everything correctly, you're good. And I got really good at that without really thinking about it, obviously. And then going to design school, and my brain was broken because they're just like, yeah, no, we don't give a shit if you like think you have the right answer. Like, just this isn't interesting. And I was like, but it's correct. So, like, it's boring.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to deal with, and I think and to figure out how to unlearn it, and to unlearn it in a way that works. Because it's not like I went to, say, MCAD and they hammered these rules in, but they also never stopped. Like, they'd be like, someone would be like, you're overthinking this. Well, okay, great. Unfortunately, that doesn't help me. That just describes the scenario. Like, yes, I am overthinking it, but what does that mean and how does that manifest itself? And, you know, it's like now I realize, well, like, I'm a highly self-reflective person. By nature, I overthink things. So the goal is to channel that into the appropriate avenues, not into destroying my ability to work by overthinking things at the beginning. And instead, it's like the overthinking should go into stuff like this, where thinking is the job, or thinking and talking is the job. It shouldn't necessarily be going into a fucking drawing or what. I mean, maybe it should, depending on who you are, but for me, it shouldn't go, it doesn't go into the work. The overthinking goes into the talking about how I make the work, I think.
Even for me, like, I think identifying, like, okay, so I have this tendency in front of me to always fight to not overthink right away because I can't make, or I get stuck. But it's still a skill I've developed, even overthinking, because I did it my whole life.
Yeah.
You know, where I got good grades. I was good at that analytical thinking. Like, it's not like it's, like, useless. So it's like identifying, like, okay, where in my process can I utilize this overthinking skill that I've done for most of my life before I decided to make art, using it in times like this, where I want to explain what I do. I want to break things down. I want to talk about things. Or even in my creative process, it's just like, as long as I break up the, here's step 1, spontaneous mess around phase, you don't get to critique yourself. And then step 3 or whatever, now you're allowed to use your analytical brain because you have stuff. And like, now you're allowed to go in and think about it way too much.
I've ended up developing like multiple kind of pathways towards doing projects. Like, they're highly described. Like, I can be like, it's this, and this. That's one way. And then the other way is this, and this. Yeah. But one of the things that I realized was, like, I was overthinking things, but I wasn't necessarily always doing research. And now I kind of view it as, no matter what you do, there's always something that looks like research. And then that should be followed by this other thing, which should be followed by the other thing. And I realized, like, I was doing all this overthinking, or what you would call overthinking, because it's only overthinking when it's bad. When it's productive, it's just called being smart or analytical or curious or whatever. The same with perfectionism. Perfectionism in the last hour is one of the best habits you can possibly have. In the first hour, it makes you a psycho. They're superpowers when they're deployed at the appropriate time, and they're handicaps when they're like put in an inappropriate time. And the thing that I was thinking about was the idea of like, sometimes you have a lucky discovery, or you throw some type together and the thing just works like within 15 minutes. But the problem is that the reason that you then rework that thing for 8 hours, despite the fact that it's done at the 15-minute mark, is because in order for you to use it, you have to kind of like earn the right to use it. Like, a lot of perfectionism is about earning the right to use something that didn't take a long time to come up with. Whether it's finding an image that just worked, or whether it's like doing a quick layout that just works, or taking a photo that just works, and then feeling like you should be in Photoshop for 3 hours making a masterpiece. Depending on how you're wired, that's your brain saying, we haven't earned the right to use this thing yet, so we need to invest in it. So the big challenge that I kind of see is that when you have the 15-minute thing, you go, oh, sick, and you put it to the side, and then you go and make 20 more 15-minute versions, and then later you come into them and you start like turning them into stuff and like tweaking them. And that's like the thing I realized, like with students, like perfectionist students, that attention has to go somewhere. They have to spend that time in order to feel what they're supposed to feel about it. So then the challenge is to be like, okay, well, cool. Let's take that energy and let's channel it into a wide variety of stuff, not into that one layout where you're a psycho that's been working on it for 16 hours when it was done at 45 minutes.
The thing about, like, it can be made in 5 minutes and that's okay, like, lesson is definitely one of the things that, like, I think I've gotten that pretty well under control now, but it took me a long time to, like, accept that. Like, I think I used to think that if I made a good design or art or whatever the fuck it is I'm calling it, it had to be a little bit painful. It had to take a while to do. Like, that was so much the criteria of, like, I needed to be able to tell the professor or the band or whoever it is, like, yeah, I worked on this for, like, 12 hours, but I'm feeling good now. And then when I make something and I'm just dorking around and it, like, I accidentally in 5 minutes have, like, the base, like, it's pretty much done, like, this looks sick.
Yeah.
Now I think I'm at a point where I'm like, fuck yeah, it took me 5 minutes, and now I can be just, like, I take it as, like, that can be the biggest superpower, because, like, what's better than having way more time? I made the work in 5 minutes, and now I just have to tweak it out a little, but I'm, like, way more, like, stoked now, and I'm like, oh, damn, that came together fast, like, I was feeling it today. Now I got the rest of my day free, or I can work on this other thing I wanted to do, or have to work on at work, you know?
Yeah. Like, for my own stuff, like, I want it to happen as quickly as possible. And when it's client stuff or otherwise, I just won't work on any one thing for very long. Like, in the MBA Studio Instagram is 90% outtakes. Like, my whole goal is just that when there's your project, there should just be a wake behind it with just so much stuff that's interesting or equally as good as the final product. That to me is a measure of success. Like, if there's a folder full of shit that when I go into it, I'm like, oh, I forgot about this. That's where I want to be. I think one of the things that happens is, like, that helps squash doubt as well. Because, like, you can do the thing where you build up your ego, and I think that's super important, because I think that's very liberating. When you just start to assume that you make good work, that puts you in a position to be a lot more honest when you're not happy anymore. I think when you're insecure, you're constantly having doubts, and it's real hard to know which stuff you should be paying attention to. But when all of a sudden, like, your ego is real healthy, that's, I think, when you can have hard conversations with yourself, because you can be like, man, I think this stuff could be a lot better. I can feel it in my bones. And it kind of gives you the freedom to do that. Additionally, it's like, I think when your process is really rich, that helps to squash doubt, because the thing you made might have only took 5 minutes, but you have whatever. I mean, like, the way I work now, it's like there might be 40 other versions, wildly different versions, that also took 5 minutes, and I'm like, yep, that's the thing. Or I don't even care, because, like, half the time I show people 10 or 20 options now. I just don't give a shit, and because I kind of like everything, because I have no standards. And then, so, like, they pick something, and I'm like, all right, cool, like, I'm happy with that. And then hopefully, like, if I have to go in perfectionist mode at that point, it's fine, because it's like, well, we've already agreed this is there, so everything that happens now is, like, between me and God. Like, I'm doing it so I can sleep at night, right? Like, it's purely about craft. It's no longer about, like, oh, well, this person liked this, will the client like it? It's like, yeah, we're there. This thing's dope. I'm just fixing every little thing that I think could be fixed.
If you know your process and you're, like, willing to do a bunch of little 5-minute things or whatever those are, 15-minute things, and, like, just produce a bunch of junk or whatever you want to call it, like, bits and pieces that have some merit, once that's there, then it's, like, becomes pretty easy. I mean, easy is a strong word. Some stuff's tough. Honestly, if you can just generate a bulk of junk to mess with, and it's some solid things you can grab onto and sculpt or whatever, then it's, like, the process of, like, being a perfectionist, like, then it's easy and funny. Sometimes I try to look at it like, if I go and I just mess around, generate a bunch of junk, and then I kind of come back to it a little bit later and almost pretend like a different person made that original, it's kind of how it's easy to, like, look at other people's work and critique shit and be like, oh, that's pretty cool, but oh, what if you did this? What if you did that? Oh, look, somebody left me all this, like, gold here. I can just, like, come up to it, like, walk up and start messing with it. Like, they already built the bulk of the thing. Like, the foundation's laid. I just get to, like, pick around and play and mess with the pieces.
A thing that took me a super long time to realize was I loved foundation year and maybe intro level core classes, because in general you work fast and you make bad stuff, and that's the expectation. And then my performance just absolutely fell apart junior, senior year. Like, I seriously think they passed me and stuff because I was smart. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I was like the kind of person that I would struggle in a class where it was one project for 15 weeks, because like the way I would do that now was like in that amount of time I'd either do research forever and then I would just barnstorm the design super fast, or I would need to make just a ton of stuff. But like, because in general the idea, right, is like, here's the assignment, go do it the way that you do it. And then the most feedback that I would kind of get on the way I did it was like, well, you're overthinking things. Now I realize, no, I should have really approached this differently. And that would have worked with me, like an in-class workshop where it's like you start the thing at 1, you critique it at 5. And those things stood out. Those worked for me. And it took me forever to realize like, oh, I really like working fast and I hate doing revisions. And that holds true today. And it's like, one of the things I learned at Target was like, I really liked working fast, even though at the time I was like, they'd ask for something and I'd be like, when do you want this? And be like, today. Like my boss was always irritated. But I eventually, once I was doing work I liked that was good and doing it really fast, then I kind of connected the dots of like, oh, it's always been like this. I've always wanted to do the thing fast, not give a shit, never revise it. Just do so much work that someone goes, I like that one, boom, done. In general, all the stuff I used to care about, I don't care about anymore, because I've kind of made it that I run out of time to deal with those details, if that makes sense. It's almost like I only look for mistakes now. Oof, that doesn't look good or right.
Like, once I started to figure out, oh, I like to work fast, and oh, that's where the good stuff comes from for me. Like, realizing that what I thought were imperfections in myself, like, oh, I'm not patient enough. Oh, I like everything to happen fast. Oh, I like speed. I want to go, and I just want to like throw shit. Accepting like that's okay. Those aren't imperfections. Those are just things about you. That's just who you are. And then accepting too that like, not only is it okay, I think it was getting over this hang up, and it still creeps back into my head sometimes when I'm working. I think about, I do shit my way, and even if it's going good sometimes, I'll let this thing happen in my head where I'm like, yeah, but like, this person who's really good wouldn't fucking do that. That's shit. This person would say that shit sucks. Like, dumb shit like creeps into my brain still. I've gotten better about it. It's this little like mantra I repeat to myself a lot. Yeah, that person wouldn't do it this way, or they might not like this, and that's fucking cool because that person's off doing their own work and it already exists. Like, that work's out there. It's covered, man. Like, you don't have to make that. Someone else already did. Don't worry. It exists and it's dope. Now you can go do your shit, and it doesn't matter if they can do it or not. Like, they got that thing that you are insecure about covered. Yeah, somebody else has got that fine illustration that you're jealous of and you can't do covered.
Yeah, I mean, I so wish that I could make, like, precise work. And I'm, like, just not a precise dude. It's just not the way that I'm wired. Like, I either have to be a mess or, like, brutally simple, but there's no in between. Yeah. But all the stuff I liked was, like, precise. That feeling of like, oh, this person wouldn't approve of it. I just realized that, so many people I realize now give me permission to do what I need to do. Like, I'll look at the way this person works and be like, okay, well, they're doing this thing. That gives me permission. And this person does this thing and that gives me permission. But then I think the other thing is that, and there's this kind of double-edged sword, which is like, insecurity is this really helpful feeling. Because I think there's always two sides to it. The first side is always stop being an insecure nerd. Always end of story. Like if you're feeling like a comparison, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, all that stuff, like it always, first and foremost, stop being a nerd. And then there's the flip to it, which is you can also go like you can go to a party, be antisocial, or not antisocial. Maybe you're shy or whatever, and you can own being shy that day. Instead of feeling bad that you're not talking to anyone, you can be like, stop being a soft nerd. If you don't feel like talking to anyone, don't talk to anyone. And then you can take that flip side to it and go, at the same time, it's not going to kill you to learn how to talk to people. I think about that in terms of work too, like that when you're having that self-comparison, it's telling you, one, stop comparing yourself, but then two, maybe you're seeing something there that you think will fill the hole in your own I always bring it down to process. It's like never about, to me, like the end product. It's always about what leads to the end product. And that you go like, okay, that reveals a flaw in how you make work. The fact that you're envious of this other thing is telling you that like something in your system needs to be reappraised, so that when you look at the other thing, all you think is, ooh, that's rad. Like that to me is like how it should be. Like you should look at other stuff and be like, oh shit, that's awesome. Not, oh man, I feel like I should do that. And it's like, well, if you feel like you should do it, like that might be telling you something, not that you should, but that you should look more critically.
Sometimes. Maybe what it is, it's not always one way or the other. It's just like being confident enough with yourself to be like, I can stop and take a moment to like, when those thoughts creep in about like, oh, I wish I could do that, and I wish I had that, or they wouldn't do this. Like, stop. I can assess it. I can either say like it's one of two things usually. Oh, that's something I can't do, and if I stop and think about it, I'm okay with it. Just stoked that they're doing it, and actually I'm doing my own weird shit, and that's also valid. And cool, we filled up the world with good art. The flip side of that is like you're saying, you can assess it and say like, oh, I love that thing, and I don't know how to do it, and you can stop, assess, and then say like, actually, that thought has been nagging at me here. Like, it keeps coming back, and like maybe that's actually something I do want to learn. Like, I'm gonna mess around and start trying to get better at it or improve this part of my process because I do want it bad enough, and I do think it's within the realm of possibility. Both are totally okay.
I kind of always just look at it as like, always like, more ego is not going to kill you. At the same time, like, what does your insecurity reveal that might be something worth being insecure about? You know, it's like people right now who are going through this thing where they've got more free time because they can't go anywhere, and they want to do a project and they want to be productive, but something they can't, and then they feel bad. And then you have like all these like people kind of going, well, you don't need to be productive, it's a crisis. And like, no shit, like I live with someone who has coronavirus right now. I understand it's a fucking crisis, but the thing is like, that person, they're not feeling bad out of guilt that they're not productive. They're feeling bad because they are motivated, and yet they can't act on the motivation. It's like, it's not happening. And then somebody else is like, oh, well, just, you know, do some self-care and watch fucking Netflix. And it's like, no, if they're insecure that everyone else is doing shit and they're not, well, screw that. Like, if you don't want to do shit and you want to smoke weed, like, go for it. Or you just want to work out, go for it. Whatever it is you want to do. But if the thing is like, you're feeling shitty because you want to do the thing, the answer is not, oh, let yourself off the hook and watch Netflix. The answer is, this has revealed a flaw. You know, procrastination, creative block, indecision, all of that stuff is a gift to you because it reveals the flaws in the process. If you assume they're personality defects, then they don't help you. They do nothing because the personality defect is the thing you're stuck with. But if you go like, okay, why am I procrastinating? And then it's like, okay, well, you only procrastinate on things that suck. And it's like, okay, I'm procrastinating on a painting. Well, painting doesn't suck. Well, by definition, it must because you're procrastinating. So then the question is, what are you thinking that makes painting suck? Figure out what that is, or what are you doing when you paint that makes it suck? But one way or another, it sucks. Because if it didn't suck, you would do it. You wouldn't be like weeding the garden or whatever people do. Or like our old studio was so clean, you know, because like I just procrastinated so much because my process was just god awful, and I didn't realize it. I just thought I procrastinated, and it's like now I'm like working in my basement. It's a disaster area, and I fix little bits and pieces when I've got nothing to do, and I'm like, oh, I could use a break. Let's like put some stuff away. Whereas before, I would have come down here and been like, oh my god, I can't work. I need to deal with this. And it's like, the messier your studio is and you're productive, the more evidence that you've made your work fun. You're not getting distracted by running weird errands and cleaning up the floor, and like that stuff matters, but like you want to be doing it the way you would do it in your house normally. You don't want to be doing it where it's like you're convinced yourself it's like, I respect my space, so I sweep the corners every day. Like, nah, fuck that. Like, you don't want to work. I love an empty table. Okay, if I'm like sitting down to do stuff and I just see an empty space, I'm like, oh yes. But at the same time, my solution to making one is just toss the shit on the floor. Like, fuck it. I want the table empty. Whereas before it was like, okay, man, maybe I need to go to Office Max.
Sometimes too, I'll like do a project and it'll make me start doing that cleaning anyway. So once I'm like actually working on shit, it's like, oh, now that I'm trying to do a screen print, I notice all this fucking boxes are in my way.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I'm gonna get them the fuck out of here.
Yeah, like once you're actually doing the work, you realize like what stuff is getting in the way of doing it for real, and not which stuff are you pretending matters, like your brand of notebook or whatever. I haven't taught it in a while, but I would teach this like start workshop, which was like this one night workshop that was like essentially like just completely deconstructing your excuses. But somehow the conversation, someone was like, they were asking about like keeping your space clean or something, and I was like, oh, I've got the solution. I don't work in a space. I work at the kitchen table or on the couch, and that solves the space issue because the couch is always empty. The kitchen table's mostly empty. I can't get wrapped up in having the perfect space if I've decided that my office is officially a backpack, a computer, and a scanner when I need to plug into it. And it's just like, boom, done. Life is easy.
Oh, yeah.
Now I need a space, but it's like for a long time, probably like 3 years, I was just like, nah, fuck a space. I did everything at the kitchen table. You know, it was like I'd put a drawing on the kitchen table or I'd sit at the kitchen table. The ability to like kind of work regardless is almost like another little kid quality. Like when you're a kid and you go on vacation, you just look for any square of concrete to skate. Like you don't give a shit. You could be on farmland and you're like, there's a 10-foot patch of concrete. Sweet. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, if you can't work unless you're in a hyper specific space. And maybe there's like an argument to be made that like at a certain level of maturity, it's like you have your studio and so on and so forth. But then again, that my wiring doesn't work that way. Like I get Gerhard Richter cannot just show up at my house and then be like, I just work at the kitchen table. He's got his deal and like in his wiring. But like for my wiring, I definitely just am like, I've gotten closer and closer to this idea of like, arm on the table, move everything to the side. Cool, I can work. And for a long time, I couldn't do that. Like I needed everything to be just so. And I think it was a manifestation of the work not being fun enough. Now I'm like so excited, right? It's like, fuck it, clear this shit out, work. Whereas before it was like the work was gonna kind of be this slog. It was gonna be hard. So then it was like, well, cool, I guess everything around it should be hard as well.
Oh man, there's so much stuff I want to talk about. I gotta get going.
Me too, I just got a text that said, are you done?
Yeah, I feel like I'm about to get that text. No, this has been so rad. I'm glad I jumped. Thanks for letting me jump on your thing, man, and like blowing up your video.
Nice meeting you.
Stay safe, man.
See ya.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.